Okay, I think we're going live now. So hello everyone and welcome to the November version of Coffee and Code. So we have a slightly different format today with the 3 speakers and hopefully a little bit of discussions afterwards. So our first speaker is going to be Johan Wiklund from MBIS, who is going to talk to us about the virtues of no colors. After that, we have Volmar Nyberg Åkerström, also from MBIS, who will tell us a little bit about his favorite features of PyCharm and or IntelliJ. Finally, I will try and do a demo of Markdown Editor that I really like called Typora. If you have any questions, as usual, feel free to post them either here on the Zoom chat or in YouTube, or perhaps in Slack. Or if you're joining us live here on Zoom today, then you can also feel free to just unmute yourself and ask your questions directly. And I'll try and relay all the questions after each talk to the speakers. And with that, I'm happy to hand over to you, Johan.
Thank you. So let's see if this works. First, there, can you see it? So yeah, got
Yes.
some nods at least. Yes, so I thought this is something I do that is quite uncommon, I think, and that is I don't have any colors in my editor at all. And so I thought I'd start this by talking a little bit about the philosophy of coding. So what is the purpose of writing code, and what do you want to convey? And I think one thing is that you could like write everything in assembly, and that would work fine, I guess. But it's hard to, and then you would be able to communicate with a computer what you want to achieve. But it's hard to communicate to other programmers that way. And it's also hard to communicate with yourself what the code is about, because you need to add all these extra comments. And that's why we have these high-level languages that help us with this. And they enable us to think in more high-level and abstract ways. And then we can try to tell the story of what our program is supposed to do to other people and ourselves, so it's easier to communicate that. So so telling stories, there's another medium where you tell stories, and that's like books or text and things like that. That's where you tell stories, and there's not any colors used here, right? So if you read, so this is an example I stole from Linus Åkesson, and this is like, imagine that the syntax highlighted nouns and verbs and adjectives in a text. Then it would look something like this, and it even the syntax highlights this string here, like the quote. And I would argue that it makes it harder to read the book or read the text and understand what is happening, because all of these extra information, that what is a noun and what is a verb and so on, that like kind of hides the story. Instead of helping you read the story, it takes up what you call it, I mean, mental capacity to actually understand and read the text. So and also, so I think more when I program, I think more about things like paragraphs and what belongs together, what should be apart, what should be a function, what should not be a function. Not so much about if it's an and or if it's an if here or things like that, or whether there's a type annotation somewhere. So I just thought I could talk a little bit about structure as well. So this is how code is structured. So this is something I'm interested in. What is happening? So here we see there's like several indentation levels here. There's some sort of initialization perhaps happening, and then there's stuff is going on. And this is like how the high level, how you break it down. But if you color everything as well, then it's you don't know where to focus, or I feel that way at least. And then, I mean, you can start looking at the code. I don't know if this was a good way. Anyway, so if you look at this, you have a for and you have a bunch of if statements. And this is important, right? You have a loop and then some conditions and you exit from them. But what is also important is what variables do you have? So here is a variable called old, and there's a variable called code, for example. Those are almost never syntax highlighted when you use a code editor. What is highlighted is the for and the if instead, and the next statement. But the next, I mean, these show up fairly well anyway. You can see this is Perl. I show some awesome language. So what I want to know is what happens to this old, oh, sorry, I shouldn't have done that. What happens with the variables and how are they used? I'm not that interested in primarily the operator. I'm interested in the variable. So this is, I have old gets the value of it. And then I compare old to it and do some other comparisons down here, right? So that is the important part to me, is not so much is this equality operator is probably highlighted in languages, but I'm more interested in what variables are involved in this if statement. And then I can figure out what is the condition. Yeah. So yeah, that's my presentation, basically.
Very nice, thank you. Do you have any questions for Johan before we move on? I guess nothing.
I have one small question. So with this argument, you of course try to emphasize the importance of the variables rather than the syntactic features of the language, right? And I mean, I wonder if you have an idea of whether there is highlighters, language highlighters that focus on this sort of features of your code. I mean, instead of, like you said, the for and the if, but rather on the variables. Because I mean, then we could both be happy. We get both the colors and the variables.
Might be. So the only thing I'm worrying about there is that if all variables, then should you have different names for every colors for every variable and stuff like that, it starts to become difficult to see everything then, I suspect. I mean, you want to highlight maybe just one or two things at a time, right? So maybe you just can search for a variable and then have a search function in your editor that just highlights every occurrence of that variable, and then you see how it's used, and then you can move on that way. That's probably how I do that kind of thing. So I just search for it and then it's highlighted, because I'm not interested in all the variables.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So just check. I don't think there's anything in YouTube. Nothing on Slack. So let's move on. Thank you, Johan. And welcome, Volmar.
Thank you very much. So I'm gonna try to share my screen and I'm gonna show some examples. I'm not sure I'm gonna make a case for everyone using an IDE, which or integrated development environment, which both IntelliJ and PyCharm are examples of. So I really agree with Johan that, I mean, the main part of your software is conveying your thoughts in code. And the IDE could be kind of a patch or a plaster, so to speak, to kind of compensate for bad features of a programming language, or maybe having your code oriented in a way that makes it difficult to read. So I'm going to try to find where I can share my screen, just a part of it. There we go. So let's see here. Are you seeing something now?
Yes.
Yes, so I'm trying to get this into proper scope. So you can see my code editor at the moment.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I'm speaking about two IDEs in this case, and one is from, or both of them are from a company called JetBrains, and they produced from the beginning an IDE for Java. And I've been programming in Java for a long time, and I've been using Python more recently. And I usually don't build stuff from the ground up. I patch things that I find and make additions to things to make them work more often than I write stuff from the beginning. So I tend to mess around in code bases that I don't really control. And in those cases, I think the IDE will help me a lot. And you can find IDEs for different programming languages, which means that they are essentially tailored to the ecosystem around a specific programming language. So for example, in the Java case, you have the IntelliJ IDE, for example, and that one is based on the POM files and Maven for running projects. And for Python, you have the setup.py and things like that for organizing your code. So think of this as one example of how you could do it using Java or for using Python. But if you're thinking about an IDE, you should consider that in the context of your own programming language and the sizes and types of projects that you're involved with. So don't take my word for that an IDE is what you need. And one example of how this could look like in, for example, a Java project. And this is a quite large Java project that I've opened at the moment in IntelliJ. So we can see that this has a tab over here where we have all the files and folders in the project. So you can see that they've organized it according to the kind of Maven kind of philosophy. We have a file or a folder called SRC for short for sources, and then we have divided into main and tests. And in the Java folder, you will find subfolders for each package that you place your own files in. And these packages are usually segmented into namespaces. So if you've seen a Java project on a file system, you usually have to kind of fold out the entire structure of the folder structure that corresponds to each dot here in the package structure. So navigating a Java project using the Finder or the Windows shell is not really a convenient way of working. So getting to a specific file could take some time and it could be difficult to navigate. And in some cases, such as this one, the code is not very well documented, and it can be difficult to find out if you actually have all the dependencies installed. Maybe not all of them are kind of available to you when you run Maven or something like that. And the IDE will kind of help you spell check your Java project for you. And this is very useful when the project is not your own. So a case for color coding in this case is not just on the actual kind of text level, which I think it helps a bit when you're working with Java, which is verbose, but also on the kind of project structure or dependency structure of your project. So you can see here that there's these kind of squiggly red lines underneath all the packages here. And that's because there are, in this file, there are dependencies for this project that are not included in my development environment at the moment. So I actually have to install these to make this work. And you can also kind of see that the code is highlighted in this case. And since this is the kind of entry point of this software, I can also run this method and start it using my IDE. There's also some useful features like opening up a terminal together with the project, and that will be opened inside of the kind of base or the root of my project. I can set it up to kind of start with some certain environmental variables and so forth for this specific project. And what I like about the IntelliJ IDEs is that it's made to work with the same project files, or at least kind of work well together with the project files that are used for running these project types from the command line. So you could specify your entire project using, or the dependencies of your project and the structure of your project using Maven, and it will kind of index all the dependencies and the what you call them, actions that you have set up in your Maven project. You could also use Ant if you prefer that. So it's kind of flexible and helps you kind of determine what you have to fix in a given project. So this kind of code highlighting and just keeping your dependencies in check and working well with these standard project files, I think, is a very big benefit of the JetBrains IDEs. So they don't force you or your collaborators to work with the same software as you are. You can work with others, and they can choose not to have the syntax highlighting and so forth. A very nice feature of an IDE in general, I think, is the possibility to kind of navigate your project structure as well. So if you have added dependencies to your project, you can kind of go to the definitions of all these dependencies. So if we, for example, scroll down a bit here, and this is a Java file, which oftentimes means it's a bit verbose. So, for example, if I want to know the definition of this specific function, I can right-click and I could kind of go to the definition of this file. And then I can kind of read up on what this function is actually doing. So if the documentation is lacking, or if I don't really remember what it does, I can go back to where the definition is found. And I can also search for all the usages of this function. So I can navigate across my entire project and find where this function is used if I'm looking to refactor in some way. So I really like the way that an IDE can understand the structure of your code, or at least on the language level, can understand the structure of your code to visualize all the dependencies between different packages and different files. So you can kind of change things up if you need to, and you can kind of track down the consequences of what you're doing, and especially if it's a project that you haven't written yourself. So I would say navigation and kind of the keeping track of all the dependencies is a very nice feature. You also usually have integration with Git, so you can track changes to your project and add files, check in, check out. You can also publish documents or code snippets directly to GitHub as GISTs and things like that. So the IDE can sort of become a dashboard for your project. So you can do most of what you're used to in just one interface. You can also navigate kind of to-dos that you can put into files. So if you add some kind of structures into the files that illustrate things that you need to keep track of in your project, you can actually make these kind of appear in different parts of the interface. So you can kind of tailor your environment a lot, and you can get a lot of help from your IDE, but at the same time, you also have to invest in learning the features of this tool. So you have to kind of commit some time and effort into learning this tool, and I would say maybe aiming for learning one that works well with these standard project configuration file is a benefit. So you're not kind of entirely reliant on this IDE to be available to work efficiently. So that's kind of my main take on why you would use an IDE in general. And I also thought it would be interesting to maybe mention an IDE that I've recently started working on or with just because I like the IntelliJ IDE. And this is called PyCharm, which is basically the same thing, but instead for Python projects. So I've prepared a very simple project in this case with almost nothing in it. It's just an example file. I think it was from the PyCharm website, actually. So here I would like to show how the refactoring functions of an IDE software could work. And this is a trivial example, but I think, it will give you a taste of what you can do with refactoring and how an IDE can help you track down the consequences of doing refactoring. Another feature which is interesting for Python specifically, I think, is that you can have PyCharm work almost like RStudio does for R. You can visualize the variables if you're doing an interactive analysis, and that can also be useful in some cases if you're kind of exploring a problem and don't really know what data you have in a data frame, or if you don't really know how you should solve a problem in the best possible way. You can kind of iteratively find your way to the solution without having to rerunning the entire project. So I have a single main.py file, and I've also created a very simple environment.yml file to define the dependencies. And this is a way of defining dependencies using a dependency manager called Conda. And what's great about PyCharm is that it can work with the requirements.txt files that you're used to. It works with setup.py files to define requirements, and it can also work with the environment.yml files to define the dependencies. So it lets you work in the way you usually do, and you can run all of this using the command line only if you would like that. So I actually usually don't even check in my project files into the Git or my version control system of choice. I just keep track of the source code and these kind of more standardized ways of defining dependencies and the pipelines. So if I go to this main file, I can just kind of run it, and we can see the output here is just a simple hi PyCharm. So all it does is actually kind of print the variable that we assign here. And if we defined any variables, let's do it like so. Let's wait for that actually. So it will run this file in a Python console, and this is an IPython console, which some of you might be familiar with, which is why you see this kind of syntax highlighting of the inputs and outputs. And it also has some kind of special features that let you kind of introspect the environment. So if I would like to refactor this and put my functions in a specific package, I could do that in PyCharm by creating a new package here, Python package, and I can just give this a name. So for example, I can name it just functions, and it will automatically add this empty init.py file to kind of say that this is a package. And it's empty for now. But I could take this print function, cut it, paste it in here. And if I go to the main here, I will see that this one is no longer available since I've moved it to another file. So I have to add an import. And I can do that by kind of letting PyCharm help me find a reference to this function. So it could actually kind of, since it's indexed my entire project, it knows that there is a function by this name in functions. the functions package, and it will automatically add the import for me, which is, I think it's a very convenient feature. So you save some time. You could also take help from the IDE itself to just kind of move this function into a new file. So for example, if I want to move this into the functions package, I could just browse there and choose the init.py file and choose refactor. And you will see that this automatically removed the function. It instead added an import to print to the functions package. And I can navigate into this by holding the command key and just clicking it. And I will see the definition and be able to kind of continue to work on this file. I mean, there are tons of these small refactorings that you do over and over again. And I mean, you will save some time on each of them. It's not a big thing, but I think, I mean, it's nice to be able to work a little bit more efficiently. And once you get used to all the kind of shortcuts, these won't be things that you even think about. And for small projects, it doesn't really make a huge difference. But when you're in larger projects, and you have maybe many dependencies across these functions, they will actually be added as well when you do the refactoring. Let's do an example, I think, with, or let's just kind of rerun this to make sure that we do get the same result. And we do get the same result. It prints the exact same thing. Another great thing in PyCharm is that you can actually work with Jupyter notebooks as well. So if I create a new one, which is just, I call it main. So this is going to be main.ipynb. It will kind of give you a rendered syntax inside of the IDE, which is text-based. So instead of the cell markers that you would see in the Jupyter notebook interface, you will see this kind of hash percentage combo. And you can also add markdown cells, which would be the same. And then you add kind of the keyword markdown. And this is specific to the PyCharm IDE, I think, at least. But here I could add some description and some markdown as usual. And in these cells, I could do Python computations such as a equals 1, b equals 2, and then a bit further down, I could add another code cell. And in here, we could just take the output a plus b, for example. So if I run this cell, I will get no output. This one is already rendered as markdown. And if I run this one, we will actually get some output, and this will be saved in the ipy.nb file. And this is actually run in the background using the Jupyter notebook on this URL. It's just started and managed by the PyCharm IDE. And the great thing about writing or working with Jupyter notebooks inside of the PyCharm IDE is that you get access to all the code completions and all the features and refactorings that you usually use in your normal Python files. And I'm also a fan of kind of keeping things simple, as simple text. And I mean, the Jupyter notebook file format is JSON based, which is maybe not the best one for source code management in general. And it's kind of different. Writing in the Jupyter notebook interface is a little bit different than working with your normal Python files. And this kind of keeps it in a familiar interface, so to speak. So I think actually I'm going to stop there. I just want to kind of open this viewer here. And if we take, for example, this, oh, right, I don't have pandas, but you can see down here that you can inspect all the variables inside of the notebook, which is something that you can do in RStudio, but you usually don't have access to in the Jupyter Notebook. And if you're running interactive computations, it might be a nice way of kind of doing debugging and things like that. And if you are using pandas and other kind of standard scientific packages, you can actually inspect data frames and navigate the data frames with potentially very large tables. And if you have plots, you can navigate the plots using these tabs. I'm not going to show this because it's going to take some time to install the packages. Pandas, for example, I didn't think of setting that up in my environment, unfortunately. So I encourage you to be curious and check out an IDE such as PyCharm. There are tons of YouTube videos that you can kind of see and see examples of your particular use cases. But I find that it saves me a lot of time. And I'm going to stop here to kind of let you ask some questions, and I can take them as they come.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. Do we have any questions here on Zoom? Let's see. Some stuff happening in the Slack channel, but nothing related, I think. I do have a question, and so you mentioned that it's good to like take some time to properly learn your IDE of choice, and I guess I'm wondering how long has it taken you to sort of get comfortable with everyday usage?
Well, I mean, first time I used an IDE, it took some time, but I mean, there are some features that are kind of similar, and once you know which features you want to use, you can focus on just learning those. For example, I'm not really interested in debugging. I work with tests, and I usually find my way. I find a way to fix the problems without kind of running into a debugger. So those are features that I haven't looked into at all that are available. And there's usually tons of plugins to do things that you want. So I think maybe kind of starting out with what problems do you have and going from there to see how you would do that in the specific IDE. I mean, you could use it as a simple code editor with syntax highlighting in the simplest case, and that's then just adding one or two features, such as kind of code navigation, not being able to navigate between different files. And for the Java case, for example, just being able to kind of collapse these the packages into a more manageable form when you're browsing it, I think is a good feature. So navigation maybe, and that's where I would start.
Yeah, sounds good. Right. Is there any other questions? I don't think so. Then thank you very much, and we'll move on to the final presentation, which is me. So let me just share my screen. So I wanted to show Markdown Editor that I've been using a lot lately. And it sort of renders Markdown as you type it, which is, I think, pretty neat. So yeah, I guess it has most of the features you'd be looking for. So if you try the header, oops, and spell it right, it will just render it for you as you type. You can go back and, as you saw, and change it. You can do subheaders, and then if you wanted to change the level of the header, you can just do command and whichever number of the level you want. It has all the basic features like text, in italic, and bold, perhaps. And of course, any lists or versions of lists that you might want. So and unstructured lists, and you can toggle the level of the list by using tab and shift tab. You can have ordered lists. Same thing there. And you can also do a to-do list. So with checkboxes. So if you were to type something like you would normally in Markdown syntax, and you get a list, and you can check and uncheck these as you want. You can do like quotes, just regular. Quote blocks and code blocks as well with the regular backticks. I think you're all familiar with. Just adding whatever code you want. And then you can also select language to get syntax highlighting, if that's your fancy. You can also, if you want to check check out what this looks like as a raw file, then you can easily toggle to the source code mode with the command and slash, and then you can see what it looks like, and you can also make changes as you wish. And get back. Now we've added quite a few headers. So let's say we want to keep track of this document a little bit better. So we want to add a table of contents, which is pretty easy. You just type talk and press enter, and you get your table of contents, and you can also use that to go directly to your different parts. Of course, it supports regular links. And this is where you'd like to go if you want to learn more. You can command click it to go to the link, or you can just paste a link and it will automatically just paste it in that mode for you. Also, you might want to add an image, bold for some reason. As you can see, the table of contents also automatically updates. So let's drag and drop an image. There you go. And it finds the path for you. And you can also select how large you want it to be, and it will update the code for it. Last but not least, it supports, of course, emojis. Right. And I guess that's all I wanted to show you, but there are lots of other features, and you can see them all on their webpage. Right. So that's it, I think, for, oh, I have some questions. So Matthias Stahl is asking, is the Markdown editor also able to compile to HTML? That's a good question. I think they have a lot of features that I have not yet tried. Oh, and yes, the name of the editor is Typora. Maybe I should have started with that. So yeah, cool. Let's just check if there are any other questions anywhere before we leave off. And I don't think there are. So if anyone has anything other to say, now is the time. Otherwise, I think we can stop there. Thank you all very much for joining. This was the last Coffee and Code before Christmas. And after Christmas, we'll have a new phase because I won't be around. We'll talk more about that later. Great.